What up? What's up, y'all? We're live on a Saturday night talking about AP World DBQs. Come on in, invite your friends. This is where, this is where the fun is happening. Even though, I don't know if you can see this, but it's literally snowing outside of my window right now. I'm not here for that. I want to get a poll up. How did you about the DBQ? Let's see. 6. You can hear me. If you can see me, can you guys post in the chat? Let me know. Let's see. Give me a emoji right now of just like how you're feeling about the fact that the test is in 19 days. Yeah, I know. Give me any emoji or word. Can't do emoji. Okay, here's one poll for you, and then which point least good about? Can I do in-docs or outside sourcing complexity? Okay, so one more poll, and then we're going to talk through this. Also just drinking coffee. Now it's late at night. Pretty good. All right, so you guys feel mostly terrible and okay. For those of you that feel really great, you guys are going to be helping me out. As we go, talk about things in the chat. I'm going to ask you to give me suggestions as I'm sort of writing this out. But if you are someone who feels awesome about it, you can be answering questions. You can be, maybe not like giving things away, like let others like give suggestions too, but you can kind of be supporting me in teaching this, right? Any specific questions you have about writing the DBQ, put in the question tab. Try to stay really specific. So don't just ask like, how do you write it? Because that's what this whole thing is going to be about. I'm going to go over how to write it. But be really specific. If there's something that you don't understand, write it in the question tab. And so I can, make sure I answer it. All right, which point do you feel the least good about? Definitely complexity is winning here. Surprised that sourcing doesn't have more points, but I get it. They're all pretty hard. So let me pull up AP World 2018 DBQ. You can get this just by searching. I'm going to put the link up in a second. College Board does post all of the past essays that have happened. And so because of that, you can, let's see, here we go. Docs. Watching Endgame in an hour. I don't want to review. Nice. Priorities. Okay, so I'm putting the documents here so you can grab them. But you can Google at any point. You can Google for any of the past essays. You can see what has been asked before. You can also see scoring guidelines. So they basically create like answer keys for every essay that the readers use to score them, right? So here's an example of a good thesis, of a not good thesis. Here's a list of like things you could have said for outside evidence, things like that. And you can also see sample essays. So they do release like a student essay that earned a perfect score. They release a lower end one too, so that you can, you can just see like what this should look like and also what it shouldn't look like. So you can see both sides. All right, so All right, let me just cut through some of these questions. How specific do we need? What is sourcing? All right, so what I'm going to do is share some slides that I've created. What I want to do is sort of talk about the overall picture of where is it? I want to talk about just like all the points and the big picture here of the essays. Here we go. All right. And then we're going to look at this specific one, right? So that you can see exactly what it looked like on last year's exam. I'm going to shout out to Eric Beckman, who is an AP World teacher in Minnesota, who graded for the exam and shared some of his notes that he learned at the read last year about this specific essay. And so there's a few slides that are inspired by him, and you can actually watch him talk about period 3 stuff tonight. And so definitely come through for that. He was not the chief reader, no. Let me just find. But he'll be live at, maybe it's tomorrow night. Tomorrow. He'll be live tomorrow. Which one is he? Things I should just have on me. Oh well. Anyways, we're doing a bunch more streams, you guys, like so many different streams. So come through. All right, share my slides. Will there be reviews for every period? Yes, we've been working on those already. This last Monday, I did period 1 and 2. Come on, share. This coming Monday, Patrick Lassiter will be doing 3 and 4. And then we're sprinkling in a lot more AP World reviews as we go. So we're gonna hit all of the different like major parts of the exam: multiple choice, short answer, long essay, DBQ, and then we'll also be hitting a lot of content as well. The biggest thing though that we're gonna really try to focus on is the Indian Ocean review tomorrow night. Thank you. Writing short answer question just for the chat. Dope. Yeah. Awesome. Okay, so we got lots of stuff coming up. Definitely check the Fiveable AP World page to see all the different streams that are happening. There's a couple happening tomorrow, Monday night. Dylan will be live with more streams next Thursday, doing like a huge mega chart to sort of remember all the different parts of the time periods and whatnot. That'll be really helpful. The link that Ton just posted has a blog post that we have that's really useful, where we pulled like all the past practice essays and then organized them by time period so that you can, review the ones you need to. And shameless plug, as always, follow us on social media, y'all. We're going to be posting all kinds of fun things, memes, making you laugh, infographics, helping you study. Okay, so I'm going to show this slide a bunch of times. So I want to just talk through each point, okay? And then I'm going to pull up a doc in 25, 30 minutes and just sort of like outline out what this essay would have looked like last year. All right, so there's 7 points that you can earn on the DBQ. Okay, so first we're just going to talk about thesis and claim. Like think of that like strong emoji. This is where you are stating an argument. This needs to be, kind of the roadmap of your essay. So you got to make sure that you do 2 things. You have to make sure that you respond to the prompt, that you are actually answering the thing that is asked of you. And then you need to make a claim. You have to take a stance. You have to actually argue something. So some examples, some of you guys were asking for sort of like sentence frames. There's basically like 2 types of thesis statements. I always want you to go for the more complex version because it's a higher bar, and you're more likely to then, if you don't reach that, you still have this like easier version. If you go for the easier version and you miss, now you've got nothing, right? So you really want me to just like straight up write it? I think this is helpful to just kind of see the overall view of it, and then we'll do that, okay? Yes, I will. But let's just kind of go through the like big picture items first, because I know that some of you guys have this information, some of you not as much, right? So you've got to address the prompt. In this case, the prompt is evaluate the extent to which railroads affected the process of empire building in Afro-Eurasia between 1860 and 1918. Okay, so the question is literally, how much did railroads affect the process of empire building? Right? It's you have to say it did, and here's why, or actually there were other reasons that were stronger. And so a basic thesis would just be like the process of railroads, greatly affected the process of empire building. Something like that, right? That qualifier word, like greatly, like, profoundly, or you could say like the railroads, like, was not the most important, feature in processing. My God, I'm not having words today. The railroads were not the most important thing in empire building. So you've got to have that qualifier word, and I'm going to show you an example of this in a second. And then because X, Y, and Z, those would be like your groupings. The more complicated version of this would be literally posing your counter argument in your thesis statement. This is what you should do, right? This is the one that you really should go for. Railroads supported empire building by blank. Here's a couple of ways they did. The word supported is qualifying it, but they undermined it by blank. No, so you don't have to agree. You don't have to argue that they did. You could flip this if you wanted to. You could argue that they undermined it mostly. But then you would still want to bring up the fact that there is a counter argument. Okay. All right, so you're going for that first one, okay? Do you support your thesis? Do we just address the counter, or do we tell the reason why the counter is true? Well, you are doing both, right? So in this example, you're saying railroads undermined empire building, but then you're saying by blank, right? By doing bring up something about it that undermined the process of empire building. Okay. Where's my tabs? Losing my tabs. Okay, so that's the thesis. Okay, so just to really quickly show you what that thesis could look like, in Afro-Eurasia between 1860 and 1918, railroads greatly, okay, so greatly is the word that is showing the reader that you are taking a stance. Excuse me. And then in this case, there's two sentences, right? The use and construction of railroads did so by X, Y, and Z, right? And that's the argument that they're making. It's basic. They're not necessarily giving you the counter argument, but they're making an argument. And so it would get the point. This is also an interesting thing to note. This last sentence has an incorrect statement, but notice that it just gets ignored. So one of the things that the readers do and are really great at is really looking for the things that you are doing correct. And if you do something wrong, they just ignore that piece as if you didn't do it. So always try things. What does it say after reliable transportation? It says allowed the poor to work and drew ideas and ambitions together. So it's doing that easy version. The harder version is basically like this student uses a lot of like bigger words, but the biggest difference is that there's a counter argument, right? The advent of the railroad and its use in Afro-Eurasia profoundly bolstered, just a nicer way of saying greatly, the establishment of these empires by X, Y, and Z, yet it also caused friction between European and Asian nations and cultures. So there's a back end, right? Yes, it was incredibly important in empire building, but it also X. All right, moving forward. Context. Okay, so really think about your context as like as your background information in your intro paragraph, right? So you want a couple of sentences that just present like this is what's going on in the world, right? This is world history. So like where are we at? A really good way to study is to basically make a list of the like top 10 biggest events in world history. Let's just like put some of those in the chat. What are some of the like absolute biggest events, right? So for example, something like World War II, right? Which would just be just massive, just a huge event. Agricultural revolution for sure, industrial revolution, colonization, enlightenment, imperialism, Cold War, right? You see how big these are? These are events that like totally transcended just like one specific thing. Columbian Exchange, fall of Rome. All of these things are really, really big. And so if you actually just make a list of those like really big events, put them in order, and then remind yourself what happened and why was that important, that's going to really help. It's going to help you to get the context point, because context is most likely going to include one of those things, right? But the big piece here is not just saying it. You're going to have to relate it back to something, right? So you have to relate it back to the prompt. So here's, that's that second piece that's super important. You have to say something that's relevant, but you have to show why it's relevant. So here's this example. This person says, in the times of 1860 and 1918, many important changes were taking place in Afro-Eurasia. This was a time of great technological discovery. That's it, right? They're talking about industrial revolution, such as the telegraph. It also was the time of industrialization, where companies started to grow larger and more powerful, as well as ideas about nationalism and enlightenment and imperialism. So that last sentence, they're sort of just listing things at that point. But this beginning part, this is a time of great technological discovery. The reason why they get the point, though, is this down here, right? Alongside the telegraph, another invention was the railroads. And so you see how it's like, here's this big event that's happening. Here's how it's specifically connected to this topic. So these are any of these things you could have talked about with railroads, right? You'd want to talk about industrialization, and then just looping in the fact that railroads are a part of that. That's how you're going to get the point. All right, so this is successful. So do this in your intro, do this as your background information. You can also earn this point in other places of your essay. If you are, kind of doing a little background within each paragraph, it happens, you can earn it there. But this is definitely, I think, the easiest place to earn it, because you're just like setting it up. It's background. All right, back to the rubric. So evidence from the documents. This is the only one where you can either earn 1 point or 2 points. So if you earn the first point, you are connecting content of the document to the prompt, right? So you're just kind of describing at least three documents. And like, here's what this guy said about this thing, right? But for you to actually earn the second point, you need to take that content and then use that to support your argument. So you'd have to go beyond that. To show you an example of this, this person says, the economy and building. So like, to begin, railroads drastically altered the process of empire building economically. The economy and building a strong economy are majorly important factors to consider, because they help facilitate economic growth. A good example of this is what whoever, I can't even read this handwriting, says in his memorandum to the Qing court, right? And so this student is literally saying, here's an example of what I'm arguing, and you should cite the sentence that you have with the right document number. So just put like in parentheses 2, that's enough. You don't have to, if you don't cite it, you are not going to lose any points. The readers know the document back and forward, like they've got them memorized. So if you just talk about a document, they'll know which document you're talking about. But it makes them so much happier if you have a little 2 next to it, because it's easy to then track it. Okay, so cite your documents because it's an easy way to, throw your reader a bone, make it easier for them to find all the things. All right, evidence beyond the documents. This is just, you have to do this right at least once. It's just describing a piece of evidence that's not within the documents. And it has to be different than your context. It can be just like more specific than your context. So for example, the construction of these railways aids in the spread of communication and allows for pilgrimage to be taken for religious purposes. For example, the railways connecting to Mecca, document 3. And then they go on to talk about the 5 pillars and explaining how important the pilgrimage to Mecca is and how that is necessary. It's a necessary investment because of the importance of this pilgrimage. So none of the documents talk about the 5 pillars. It's an extension of knowledge here, and this is how you would earn that point. Okay. You can blend context and thesis in the first paragraph or 2. You can also put context anywhere if you forget. Oh, yes. Yeah. So the only points that have like specific places where you have to have something written is thesis. Thesis has to be in the beginning or the end. But other than that, everything else can sort of be in different spots, but there's a place where it makes sense in just like an outline. That's what we'll go over in a second. All right, sourcing. I find sourcing to be like one of the hardest points for students, but if you can really like build it as part of just how you talk about documents, it makes it a lot easier. So if you haven't been using this acronym, which is HIPP, maybe there's another one that you've been using. HIPPO is just adding outside evidence, but HIPP is definitely the best. HIPP or HIPPO are definitely the best acronyms here. And so basically you have to do one of these 4 things 3 times. So you don't have to do any specific version of that. You could do context 3 times. You could do 1 context, 1 audience, 1 purpose. Doesn't matter what it comes down to, but you need to analyze at least 3 documents. So as with anything, you need 3 to get the point. So my suggestion is to do this for at least 6 or for all the documents if you can. But you want to try it as many times as you can because that gives you more chances. So if you try it 3 times and you get 1 wrong, you're not going to get the point. But if you tried it 4 times and got 1 wrong, you'll still get the point. So I'll show more examples of these too when I'm sort of writing out. Well, actually, I'll go back to that after. All right, and then I know that, let me check this poll again. Complexity is definitely one of the hardest things. I think it makes it just really hard because we don't have a lot of examples of essays with it yet. And so as teachers, it's hard to really show all the different ways you can do it. So a couple pieces of information here. It's really like a holistic point. It's not something that you can just say, include a paragraph and then get the point. You can include the paragraph and that can help you get the point, but it's something that you have to sort of have throughout. And I'll show you how you can put it in your thesis and within your every body paragraph. So honestly, the most straightforward way to get complexity is your counter argument. So if you're writing an essay that's saying, these things were similar, then you could get complexity by considering how they were different. Okay, so just consider that other piece of it. So I don't have like a slide to show you because there isn't just like one thing. Excuse me. Okay. All right. Let's go into. I'm just gonna open up a Google Doc and the slides. I wish I could have 2 things opened at the same time. Kind of frustrating. All right. So what I'm going to do is new document. What I'm going to do is share my screen on the document, and okay, so let me click out of that. Okay, so sharing my slides. I mean, my, oops, freezing a little bit. Okay, I should be back now. Oh man, you guys, we've had so much internet trouble this week. It's been crazy. Can you imagine not having internet at home for like 5 days? 2018 DBQ practice. Okay. Let's just, I'm just gonna make this like huge so that you can read it easy. All right. So I'm trying to see, I really wish that I could. Actually, I think I can share my whole screen. Let me share my whole screen instead of this. That way we can look at both at the same time. Share screen. Share your entire screen. All right. Okay, so now you'll be able to see everything. Move this here. And then I shared the docs with you. Now I just need to open up those docs on my end too. All right, and we're gonna do this a couple more times, you guys, too. So we'll have some students writing essays live too. Also in the Discord, we have a space for you to upload practice essays if you want one of us to look at it. So it's something that students are really taking ownership of, which is awesome. And yeah, you can get in there. Okay. All right, so the biggest thing that I'm going to be talking about here is really just like, how do I start? How do I approach this? I'm going to kind of outline things out. I'm going to show you my process, but also outline things out, and hopefully write at least one body paragraph. Okay, so the very, very first thing that you need to keep in mind of is that you will not have a rubric given to you on the exam. But it is listed like this. This is exactly how you'll see it. So it's not going to look the same as, other things that you use, but it is here. So just remember that you do have these bullet points on there. You can almost use this as a little checklist for you to remember all the things you got to do. That's what I would do, is just sort of check things off as you actually add them into your essay, or use this to, like, if you go back and reread your essay, if you have time, then check them off to kind of just find them in there. All right, so the prompt is here. Evaluate the extent to which railroads affected the process of empire building. The very first thing I'm going to do is really just make sure I understand the prompt. Evaluate the extent to which railroads affected the process of building in Afro-Eurasia between 1860 and 1918. Okay, so just so you guys know, because I'm showing you my whole screen, I'm not looking inside of Crowdcast. So for those of you, again, that feel really good about this, please help me out and answer questions, in the questions tab. And I'll jump back in a few minutes. But I want to just sort of jump in, right? And so, okay, so the first thing that I want to do as a student is just make sure I really understand what this is asking, because if you don't, then no matter how good all your other pieces were, you're not going to get these points. So this evaluate the extent to which is how you're going to see these prompts kind of start. And that's the like cue that you need to argue something, right? So you need to argue whether it did or it didn't. And this here is talking about specifically railroads affected the process of empire building in Afro-Eurasia, right? So this is the actual topic. And then they give you, well, actually, let's highlight this one as like sort of the actual topic. Put it in Fiveable blue. Right? That's the topic of it. And then you just get like a place and a time. Okay, so if I'm just thinking really clearly about like, okay, well, what is this question asking me to do? I'm going to need to argue how much of an impact railroads had on empire building, on the process of empire building. You know, like this is really, that's just kind of helped me just sort of source this. Okay, so then to give you a sense of just like the steps that you're gonna take, this is how I would approach it. You can always approach things a little bit differently. First, you know, really understand the prompt. Let me actually share this document. So you got it. You can view it, but you won't be able to do anything else. Crowdcast, where are you at? Here we are. Okay. All right, here is the document if you want to follow along as I'm sort of in here. All right, so the very first thing that you want to do is just really understand the prompt. You know, make sure you understand what the heck is being asked of you. The second thing that I would do is to generally like think about, well, what was that? Second thing I would do is to read through the documents, just trying to understand, looking for quick summary. You know, what is this document about? And how does it relate to the argument? How does it answer the prompt? So I'm literally just going to look through. I'm not thinking yet about like all the different pieces that I need to include, but I'm just trying to figure out like, what is this document saying and how might I use it, right? And that's going to kind of help me organize the rest of the time too. And I'm just going to literally make a list on, you know, you basically have not necessarily scratch paper, you have where you're writing your essay and then you have the documents. So I might just on this piece of paper, you know, find some extra like this space down here, literally just write 1 through 7. And then I just want to write a few words of just like, what is this saying? And then how does this answer the prompt? Okay, then what I would do is then organize the documents into sort of like groups that I can then, you know, discuss what's happening. Like, how am I going to do this, right? Like into groups / like body paragraphs, right? I'm giving myself a little outline. So I've looked through all the documents. I know what they all say now. And I just want to make sure that I, you know, kind of understand how I'm going to talk about them together. Okay, the fourth thing that I would actually do is, and I would still even do this here, I want to brainstorm context. So this is that like, okay, what major thing can I talk about at the top here in my background information? And brainstorm context and then write a thesis. Like I'm just going to kind of brainstorm a few ideas of like, what do I want to talk about? And then I'm going to write a thesis here that includes, you know, the answer to the prompt. The reason why I'm going to write it here is just to give me a little bit more time to like think it all through. And so basically all of this has to get done in the first 15 minutes. Okay. That's your goal time, 15 minutes. You might be able to do it in less, but if you don't take at least a solid like 10 minutes, get your bearings, look at all the documents that you have, figure out how you are going to position them. It's going to make for a lot stronger of an essay. I know some students get all like, I just need to start, I'm going to run out of time. But if you just start, you're not necessarily going to know what you need to say. And so this will give you a better essay. Another like side note that I want to just mention is that the actual topic, someone asked like, what do you think the topic's going to be? The topics of the prompts are incredibly, they can be really random, especially for the DBQ, because the DBQ, you have all the answers in front of you, right? The LEQ is going to be a little bit more broad, so that there's lots of different things you could talk about. But the DBQ could be about a really specific event, like railroads is not that specific. But in the past, they've had ones on the Olympics or cricket, on the flu after World War I and the responses to that. Super random stuff that, like, don't be surprised if you open up the documents and you quickly realize, like, what the heck? I never read about this, right? Or like, I studied for so many days, so many hours, so many weeks, and I never read anything about this really specific thing. It doesn't matter. Like, you don't have to really know a lot about it to get this right, because the context should be easy enough, because it's going to be like a big major pattern. And yeah, you'll actually like have the documents with the answers in them. And so just think of it that way, right? Okay, so then obviously then I am, actually right now, start writing, now write the doc, now write the essay. The way that you're going to outline your essay, paragraph 1, intro will include context, which is about 4 sentences. It's not like a hard 4, but like 4 sentences. And then thesis, which can be 1 or 2. I'm someone that just likes to get it into 1 sentence, but you can get it correct for 2 sentences. Then body paragraph, oh my God. Body paragraph, in each body paragraph, that's going to look like topic sentence, evidence from a document, and then sourcing. This is HIPP. Choose one of HIPP about that document, of that doc. And then you do it again. I would do this 3 times. Evidence from a doc again. Sourcing 2 or 3 times. And then at some point in here, also do like outside. So let's say you do outside of it. Okay. All right. So let's just actually like jump in, right? So, so you'll do body paragraphs times 3. And then at the very, very end, conclusion is just, all you need in the conclusion is restate the thesis and like speak to your counter argument a little bit. This kind of helps you like tie the bow on complexity. So maybe like 2 to 3 sentences, just sort of like recapping your argument, but also what the other side is saying. And then restating your thesis is super important, because that's how you can get the thesis point either in the intro or the conclusion. Okay. All right, we're good. Let me just check in here. Lots and lots of questions. Okay. So again, if you guys can help me answering some of these questions on here, I will definitely get through some of them after, but it'll just be helpful. All right, so let's get through this. To help us speed up some time, you can, as you're doing scoring guidelines, as you're doing practice essays with AP exams, like released ones, you can get the scoring guidelines, which literally have a breakdown of like what all the documents were about. All right, so we'll open up eventually. Okay, so just to like save us a little bit of time here, we'll just kind of look at it, you know. Always look at the source first. Just helps you like place it. So this is a petition in English to the British colonial government of India from the British Indian Association, an organization consisting of high castes. So this is specifically petitioning, you know, the Brits. So if we just scroll down here, I'm just going to pull this over so that we just kind of have it. Right, so document 1 claims that high caste Hindus are subject to abuse from Europeans and forced to interact with the masses outside the train platform, outside the trains. All right, so he's saying, all right, so if I just kind of go through this, so maybe what would be useful is if I just sort of like do that 15-minute thing and kind of show you how I think through this, right? So railway travel for Indian natives has for a long time been full of their most bitter and serious grievances. The miseries suffered equal the horrors of the Middle Passage. So basically it was like rough, right? We would beg to draw your attention to the bad treatment of native passengers with no distinctions being made between them, right? So he's kind of saying that, like, you know, the railroads themselves led to like kind of bad blood between the two groups, especially difficult for women, right? Native gentlemen of birth and respectability and striving to avoid large crowds to be found in third-class carriages find themselves even worse off in a second-class seat, right? Meant to degrade and insult. So they're frustrated by it. And so it might just like make a note, you know, this was petition in English to British authority from India. Okay. Doc 2, this was Qing official and to the Qing court. And this is in 1867. Okay, so what is he saying? What should we do about telegraphs and railroads? The Qin dynasty built the Great Wall. At the time was considered a disaster, but then we relied on it. If we build telegraphs and railroads, China will likewise enjoy great benefits from them in the future. So building now can be useful later, right? Moreover, as the work of constructing them is enormous, it will be quite beneficial to the poor people now, right? We'll open up jobs. However, although the foreigners plead with the court to conclude a formal treaty permitting them to begin this work, this absolutely must not be done. Perhaps the government could give its generous permission, but only if the Western interest can devise a plan. Okay, so remember, I'm still trying to think about like how am I going to actually include this? So this is definitely a like economic, like good. I don't know, I'll say like +1. Saying like, yeah, it helped a lot. This is sort of like cultural, like bad, you know? So like this is saying like it sped up the process, but in doing so, like I might want to use this for my counter argument, right? In doing so, really threatened like native cultures. All right, document 3. Here we have an Ottoman government report. Also, just to be clear, like on when you're actually writing this in those first 15 minutes, you might write less. words that I'm writing for you right now. I'm just trying to like think through my thoughts. So this is an Ottoman government report concerning a proposal to build a railway. All right, unless an alternative way other than the Suez Canal controlled by the British is found to connect the holy cities to the rest of the empire, the Red Sea coast of Arabia might fall prey to the evils of those who strive to overthrow the very foundations of the caliphate. At present, Muslims going on pilgrimage must either use foreign ships where they are subjected to humiliation or travel by camel, a very challenging journey. And so basically, like, railroads are necessary to, one, like, help Muslims on pilgrimage and to show power of Muslim of the caliph. Okay. All right, so they have to be built solely by Muslim involvement. So we want to make sure if we can get a huge amount of finance from, get financed and built by Muslims in order to keep control, right? So they do talk about the Suez Canal here. They see the Suez Canal as a bit of an issue because there is, you know, someone owns it, right? The British own it. Let's see. Our Sultan must personally lead this highly significant undertaking, right? So there's definitely some economic +1 here. There's also a cultural +1. Things that are good. All right, document 4. So document 4 is a map. Cape to Cairo Railroad. Gigantic proposal, right? So it's not something that's actually constructed, but it's proposing a railway that would connect the entire continent of Africa, north to south. And so this is, so some of the things I might want to write down from this is just, you know, clearly we do have some railroads already in the north and the south. We then have British territory that almost connects, right? So where is this coming from? This is coming from an article illustration from the Auckland Weekly News, a newspaper published in British New Zealand, right? So if you think about why, you know, think about this, the fact that the British are posting this, the proposed, so where does it talk about Cecil Rhodes here? Oh, here, and Rhodes's gigantic proposal, right? So the argument here is like, if we build massive railroads to connect, huge amounts of land to connect North and South Africa, one, we're going to be able to actually connect our empire, right? Now the Egypt and South Africa are connected. Two, it gives us reason to sort of get this territory, right? And we're just going to be able to actually keep control over it, right? Easier to control, to transport goods / people, and reason to expand empire. So this is definitely like a economic +1, also kind of a political +1. Okay. All right, checking in. Are we doing all right? Is this helpful? Give me something in the chat. Give me like a +1 if this is helpful. Just want to check to make sure this is helpful. +1, yes. All right, good. Just making sure. Whoa. I don't know what just happened. Okay, whatever. All right, so back to the essays. I think a lot of you guys are just typing +1. +10. Okay. All right, back to the documents. Let's just keep going. Plus a million. All right, so document 5. Let's see what document 5 says. This is Sir Henry Norman, an English politician. Politician discussing Trans-Siberian Railroad. Right. Since the Great Wall of China, the world has never seen an undertaking of equal magnitude. Russia single-handedly has conceived it and carried it out. Its strategic results are already easy to foresee. It will consolidate. So he's actually helping us out because he's kind of listing things, right? Consolidate Russian influence, which also makes me think of the document right before, right? Consolidate, if you just even kind of consolidate, just to remind us, same word there. Consolidate Russian influence. This will be slow steps. The expectation that the railroad could be used to transport masses of soldiers. Let's see. So they could respond from an attack. The line and its organization would break down utterly under such pressure. Wait, hold on. The expectation that the railroad could be used to transport masses of soldiers from European Russia to China, either in response to an attack or for Russia herself to launch an attack, is yet far from becoming a reality. The line and its organization would break down utterly under such pressure. But bit by bit, it will grow in capacity, and the powers that have enormous interests at stake in the Far East, if they continue to sleep, as England has done of late, will wake to find a new, solid, impenetrable, self-sufficient Russia dominating China as she has dominated sooner or later every other Oriental land against whose frontier she has laid her own. Right? So they're basically saying this is awesome for Russia because in Russia they now have the power to consolidate their empire, and as English politicians, as the British, we got to act, because if we don't, we could run out of time. One, Russia could actually become more powerful, especially as it relates to China. But two, it's like, what are we doing, right? This is a huge, they're like, even though it's going to take years to do, the benefits are huge, right? We can transport masses of soldiers. We can compete with other states, right? And so this is definitely like a political +1 in terms of like being able to transport soldiers and consolidate influence, competition, right? So they're definitely saying a very similar thing to number 4, right? So it's like they're saying this is good, and this is basically kind of the map to show how we could do this in our own empire. So I already see how I might want to use those together, right? 6. Okay, so this is the governor of French West Africa. Speech delivered to Speech given to the Colonial Administrative Council of Dakar. All right, so we wish to truly open up to civilization the immense regions that the foresight of our statesmen and the bravery. Hang on a second, let me just turn the light on. Whoop, getting a little dark. Okay, so Governor of French West Africa, we wish to truly open up to civilization the immense regions that the foresight of our statesmen and the bravery of our soldiers and explorers have passed down to us. The necessary, so like basically to get to like physically reach railroads, make it easier to physically reach new locations, right? The necessary condition for achieving this goal is the creation of lines of penetration, right? We need to get to places that we haven't been able to go before. A perfected means of transportation to make up for the absence of natural means of communication that has kept this country in poverty and barbarism. Yikes. So it's saying we, because of some geographic, geography makes it hard to actually consolidate power through transportation and communication. True economic activity cannot even be conceived without railroads. All right, so it will increase economic activity. It is therefore our duty as a civilized nation to take those steps that nature itself imposes and that are the only effective ones. It is now everyone's conviction that no material or moral progress is possible in our African colonies without railroads. Yeah, so this is definitely like political +1, economic +1. I see this as the same, very similar to like the Russia one, right? This is just them. This is France now saying the same thing. We should do this. Document 7. The effect of this vast movement of people with the interactions it has brought about. Oh, wait, sorry. Lieutenant Colonel R. Gardner, British Army officer, speaking about Indian railways. Okay, so some context could just be that India was a British colony. The effect of this vast movement of people with the interactions it has brought about between what previously were great nationalities practically unknown to one another. So like connecting new cultures is now beginning to be felt in the drawing together of people of India with the recognition of common interests. New cultures across one region through a common interest, right? Basically building a new nationalism. In other words, the birth of a common national and patriotic sentiment, which, if well directed, would eventually mold India into a unified and loyal people. Still the brightest gem in the imperial crown. It's funny that like he's saying this as like you're gonna have a unified patriotic body. And even though he knows that India is a colony of Britain, he's still saying that it would then be even bigger gem. It's surprising that he doesn't see that if that happens, the likelihood of increased fight for independence is there, which is exactly what happened, right? All right, so we've got all the documents. So you see how it kind of takes about 15 minutes. I'm going a little slower because I'm doing this live and not just in my head. But to kind of show you where we're at, right? We understood the prompt. We knew what it was asking. We read through the documents and just sort of figured out what they said and how they might answer the prompt. And now we need to like organize the documents into some groups. So I'm going to go later than 7. So you got to go. But we're just going to do a little bit more. So if I want to organize this into groups, I'm just trying to think now, like, what am I actually going to argue? So I want to argue. Also, keep in mind, there's a lot of right answers to every essay. Like every DBQ, whatever the DBQ is about, there's a lot of ways that you could approach it, and you can be right in all of them. It's just about how you actually like stand on that argument. Okay, so I want to argue that railroads supported the process of empire building. So maybe like the spread of railroads supported the process of empire building in the 19th and 20th centuries. Or maybe I'll say this. During the 19th and 20th centuries, the spread of railroads supported the process of empire building through, and now I need to kind of, I'm kind of seeing where I'm at. So what are my kind of reasons? I definitely want to say through consolidating power of colonial empires, and creating, like, increasing economic production. And then this is going to be kind of my counter. So I might have like a +1 here, a +1 here, and a -1 is kind of the threats to like traditional culture, but also like led to nationalism, which would have made this process harder, right? And so if I think about those three kind of groupings, consolidating power of colonial empires, I definitely want to use, what was it? 5, 4. I want to use the map. Let's look through them. I want to use 4, 5 in Russia, and 6. Okay. In increasing economic production, I want to use probably 2 and 3. Whoops. And then in this last one, like if I just make a whole paragraph, my counter argument, I'm really trying to go for that complexity point. So this last one, I would use like 1 and 7. 1, 2. So now I have them all in there, right? And so during the 19th and 20th centuries, the spread of railroads supported the process of empire building through consolidating the power of colonial empires. Oops. And increasing economic production. However, railroads also connected colonized people, which eventually threatened colonial state building through increased nationalism and movements for independence, right? There's my thesis. So I wanna just jump into the chat for a minute. So okay, so that's my thesis. I would say, let me just see if I can answer a couple of these questions. So if you have questions about thesis and all these are more in the body paragraph. So let's look at this. Would this thesis earn a point? So this was Dylan's thesis. Railroads affected the process of empire building between 1860 and 1918 to a great extent. Oh, yeah. So let me make sure that I have my my own. Oops. I have a qualifier. Supported. Okay, so I do have a qualifier. So railroads affected the process of empire building to a great extent. There's a qualifier, having both positive and negative effects for the empire builders. Railroads were used to help spread the influence and land of empires and to justify imperialism. However, railroads also hurt imperial powers by being used to fight against imperialism. Yeah, I mean, I think that would earn the point. I think the way to make this better is to be a little bit more specific. So you could, instead of just saying, however, railroads, like by being used to fight against imperialism. So like, instead of just saying that, you could say like kind of how I did, right? That they like increased nationalism, which like led to movements for independence later on, something like that. But yeah, I think that would earn it. Okay, let me see if there's any other ones. Okay, I'm going to do context in a second. Yep. Yeah. So For that formula for your thesis, just think about, just like I did, you know, during, give me the time periods, and then you kind of restate the, like, notice how I restate the words of the prompt. I do that to just make sure I'm actually answering them, right? Because this idea of like process of empire building is different than just empire building. It's minimal, but it is, right? And so just give me the time periods, restate the question, and then answer it. So I have two clear answers here of how I'm going to do this, and then do your counter argument. That's how I would do it. But do it after, right? So do it just like I did. Look through the documents first, and then write your thesis. Same question. Okay. Yeah, how do you organize the documents? So hopefully I showed you this through this. You know, like I need to use the documents to prove my point. So I've got to organize them into like arguments, right? I want to find things that make them similar or that pit them against each other, but I can talk about them in the same paragraph. All right, so let's go back into my essay. Okay, should be able to see the whole thing now. Oops. Okay, just want to make sure. Okay, can you see? Okay, there we go. All right, so I basically wrote a thesis, you know, and I would want to kind of write this before because it's not going to be the beginning of my essay. But in terms of, you know, on this document, right before it, I need some context, right? Also, I know this is like huge, so it's just because it's like 18 size font. All right, so obviously I want to write about, I could write about industrialization as within my context, but I think imperialism makes the most sense, right? I'm talking about this time period where imperialism is on the rise. And so what I might say is almost connecting both of those. So, you know, in the period, in the 19th century, industrialization spread from Western Europe to basically the rest of the world, right? To the rest of the world, or maybe not all of it, but to other states, to states in other regions through, you know, trade, empire building, because of competition, whatever. So let's just say that, right? Like through industrialization, let's say like production of goods increased dramatically and needed more markets, or let's say, I'm gonna write this again. The process of industrialization required more natural resources, more raw materials, and more markets to sell the increased production of goods. This led to the rise of a new imperialism where European states would like directly control colonies, colonial, you know, colonies through like political and economic means. Okay, now I need to make sure I'm tying this back, right? The railroads were a technological improvement brought about by industrialization and aided in the expansion of empire because transportation was easier. Something like that, right? So I just wrote like, how many sentences are right? 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 sentences. Notice how I explain some really major things that are happening, industrialization and imperialism, but then I specifically connect that back to railroads, right? Like you have to prove that like what you're saying is part of the essay. So I might highlight this as, say this is going to be yellow. This is my thesis. This is going to be I don't know, blue. All right, let's make this a nicer yellow to read. Right, so there's my context, there's my thesis. So now I'm heading into paragraph 2. I should already have 2 points, right? And remember, you need half of the points available to pass. So if that's the case, then I really am looking for 2 more points to just get at least a 3. So just to kind of help you calm down and feel like you got this, like 2 points in 1 paragraph, doable. Okay, let me split my screen again. Bring back up the document. So let's show you what a body paragraph would look like. Okay, so let's say I want to talk about consolidating power. Railroads were beneficial for empire building because they were a tool used to consolidate power. Then I might kind of explain this. I might kind of set this up, right? Because I'm going to talk about, what was it, document 4? Or I might even want to talk about Russia first. As, for example, and now I'm going to do this document 5. For example, as Russia completed Trans-Siberian railroads, Britain noticed this advantage to connect the entire empire through like reliable transportation. Sir Henry Norman pointed out this advantage, pointed out the clear benefits for transporting, soldiers quickly. Okay. So then let me just toss in, this was document 5. And now I want to just like analyze this a bit, right? So, I can either talk about context or purpose, POV, audience. So in this case, I think purpose is really obvious because he specifically is saying if Britain is going to keep competing, we've got to start building railroads too, right? The purpose of this editorial was to convince Britain to invest in empire, in railroads that would they would allow them to remain competitive in the event of an attack. Okay, so here I've got, here's one document, you know, whatever. And then here's, let me change this. So there's a document, and here's like the sourcing of it, you know. Okay. And then I would want to say, you know, basically Cecil Rhodes agreed British imperialist Cecil Rhodes agreed and proposed like a railway connecting the empire, connecting Cairo to Cape Town to consolidate British power in Africa. Here's 4, and then I might say this map was published in the British colony of New Zealand to, I don't know, flaunt the power of Britain and convince British citizens that this tool, that railways as a tool for power consolidation was vital. Okay, so again, here's my evidence. Here's my sourcing. Okay. I have one more document that I want to add in here, which is document 6, right? In French West Africa, the governor proposed a similar project that would connect the the areas that had been harder to reach. Okay, I want to add in some outside evidence here because I want to try to get that point. So, you know, I could have included it sort of right after one of these things, but let's say I use it sort of at the end here, or first let me add some like sourcing for this. So, the governor of French West Africa. This is in 1904. There was, you know. Oh, what is it? What's the Ethiopian-Italian War? So maybe like was around then, maybe like 1901. The Italian colonists in Africa had just battled for power in Ethiopia in the years before this speech was given, which may have prompted faster like solutions for ruling in remote parts of the colony, something like that. That could even be my outside evidence, right? It's like it could be context, it could be outside evidence. Okay, so let me just include let me just jump back up here and say something like, let me see what ideas you guys have. So give me an idea that you have about outside evidence in this paragraph. What's something that we could talk about, some event that we could talk about that's related to imperialism? Maybe just like the Berlin Conference even. Or if you have another idea, I can add that. So if we add like the Berlin Conference, I might even add it just like up here. Like railroads were beneficial for empire building because they were a tool used to consolidate power. Like in the 1880s, the Berlin Conference effectively divided up Africa, which meant Africa into European colonies, which meant power in these was spread out. This created a need for European states to consolidate power. You know, or maybe that's even, you know, whatever. So something like that, right? Russia completed the Trans-Siberian Railroad to solve this problem in their own region. Britain noticed this advantage to connect the entire empire through reliable transport, and Britain, you know, there you go. And now I've got outside. Here we go. Here's my outside evidence. Okay, so if this is the case, and then what I would do is just write another, you know, paragraph 2 would be that other thing, right? Economic advantage. So whatever 2 documents I said up there, 2 and 3. Paragraph 3 would be counter-argument, rise of nationalism, 1 and 7. And then my conclusion is just restate thesis and summarize argument with that counter argument. Right. Perfect. I mean, you could put the counter argument in other places too. Like you could switch these out. That's basically how it would play out. And you would write the 2 body paragraphs similar to this, where it's like, you know, set it up. The outside evidence can go anywhere, but set it up and then evidence sourcing, evidence sourcing, evidence sourcing. Okay. Would it be fine if we only did 2 groups? Yeah. So you're not being graded on groupings anymore. You are now being graded on just the fact that you can have an argument. And so that complexity point, you know, you got to pick it up somewhere. So having a 3rd paragraph just allows you to like actually talk about all the documents. And let me stop sharing my screen. It allows you to talk about all the documents and just gives you more chances to like have that analysis ready, you know. So I would say write 3 paragraphs because it's hard to put all the documents into 2. But you can see how like timing wise, you know, if you really spend that first 15 minutes organizing, you should have enough time to do it. Okay, I'm going to look at these questions. So go ahead and upvote if you haven't already. Do that one after. Okay, so sourcing is is analysis, right? So it's like you have a document, you need to think about like more than just what the document says. You need to think about like where that person is coming from, or what is going on in that time period that would help explain why they said what they said. And so that's how you like sort of position it. Like you have to consider the purpose of it so that you're not just saying, well, it says this thing and therefore it's true. Something like that. So you have HIPP that you can use. You can use any combination of HIPP. You got to do it for 3 documents, right? So POV, purpose, audience, context, whatever is easiest for that document. Because there's some documents like speeches, I think, are really easy to do purpose. Like, why did they give that speech? What was the purpose of them talking, right? Anyone. I also think it's easier to do audience with speech, because it's like, who are they talking to? What do they hope that they're going to think? Any government document, you would want to think about either audience or POV, because it's like the government is saying that thing. So, where are they coming from? Or people are going to, respond to it in a certain way because the government said it. Any map or chart that you get, really just look at who published this data. All data has bias. Like a human puts together that data. And so why did they pull together that specific data? What did they want to show from it? So HIPP, context, Peter's got it. Context, audience, POV, purpose. Memorize those. Those are not on the exam. You don't have a rubric in front of you. You have directions, but memorize that and do more practice. And in our Discord channel, you don't have to always upload a full practice essay. You could just write, sourcing for one document and post it and talk about it together and see different examples. After each piece of evidence, yes. So evidence sourcing. How specific do we need to be when citing evidence in a doc? You don't need to don't use quotes. Quotes are a huge waste of your time. Use just evidence kind of summarizing them. But then in the actual citation, I literally just put the number. You don't even have to write doc 2. You could just write 2 and move on. You don't need to cite the actual person or anything like that. Just put 2. And if you don't do citations, you don't lose any points. Notice that's not a point on the rubric. But citations help you quickly see how many you talked about and which one you might be missing. Saves you time later. It also makes it a lot easier for the reader. So the exam readers basically memorize the documents. They grade so many of them. And so if you talk about a document and you don't cite it, they know what you're doing. But no matter what, if you can find ways to make the reader happy, this is one of those ways, right? It's a lot easier for them to grade an essay if they can see which document you were talking about. So it's just like something you can do that's really helpful for you and really helpful for the reader. So you may as well. Okay, what do you do if you know outside evidence but don't know how to relate it to your thesis? Don't use it. So you're only going to get the outside evidence point if you relate it to your thesis. So, make sure that whatever you're choosing is easy to connect. You got to connect it in somehow. So if you can't do that, then you're going to have a problem, right? So just ask yourself, what is this a cause of what I'm trying to say? Is it an effect of what I'm trying to say? Is it just a similar other example, right? It's just another part. It's just another thing happening in the world. It's just another example of that. Anything like that, right? Think about cause, effect, and comparison. How do you know which of, this one says ACAP, which are of HIPP to use? Yeah, so Eric commented on here, think of it like a menu. you don't know, and there is no right answer. You could get a document that could have really clear answers for all of them. The best one to choose is the one that you can the best one to choose is one that you can truly do, right? So just make sure that you can really explain it, and that's where you're going to be best suited. I tend to think that like purpose is maybe the easiest one. And so you could just do purpose for all of them, you know? Like, why does this document exist? But there's no way to do it. To get the complexity point, do you need a counter argument? So there are other ways to get the complexity point. You could be comparing, as you're talking about railroads in, you know, as you're talking about the effect of railroads in the process of empire building, you could compare the differences between different regions. So no matter what, complexity is like adding an extra layer. And so the easiest way to do it is through a counter argument. This is what most teachers are recommending at this point. You know, there are other ways to get it, and we've seen it happen. But this is definitely like the clearest path. So I would just suggest like finding a counter argument, putting it in your thesis, and writing it in your essay. That's kind of the best way. Is the counter argument an attempt to fulfill the complexity point? Yes. Yes. So it also gives you another chance to bring in the documents in a different way, right? Counter argument gets you complexity. You can put in the conclusion. You can just write a whole paragraph about it. It doesn't weaken your argument to really talk about the fact that there is another argument, right? Like it makes your argument stronger because you're like, yeah, like it wasn't all good. I can still argue that railroads were beneficial, even if I can also say, you know, it also led to the demise of colonized empires, but right. Okay, so let me keep talking about complexity a little bit. So if the essay is asking you, evaluate the extent to which, I don't know, this is a super easy one, but like evaluate the extent to which like the Atlantic revolutions were different. You might argue they weren't. They were very similar. But you might point out a big reason as to why they're different, and that would be your counter argument. That would be how you get complexity. So with complexity, they want, this is the hardest point to get, complexity. Like you have to really like nail it. I would guess that this is the point they give out the least because it's just difficult. So remember, you can get a 5 on the AP World exam and not get the complexity point. So it's not going to make or break you. But if you can really like throw in that counter argument, that's the easiest way to do it. So put it in your thesis. Make your thesis say, you know, the Atlantic revolutions were actually very similar because of X and Y, but they were different because of Z, right? And then take that throughout, just making sure that you sort of bring that up. Someone asked, can my counter argument be supported by outside evidence? Yes, totally can. You could have 3 body paragraphs that support your argument. You've divided out the documents into 3 paragraphs. And then at the end in your paragraph, you then are getting into the counter argument. You can, but you can go anywhere. This is why it's not easy, because it's holistic. Like you should be able to step back and look to see if this essay is like really, really good, or it just kind of does the things it's supposed to do. That's the difference. Yeah, I didn't even, and would that count as outside evidence? So you can't double dip on points. So if they give you a point for these, if you write outside evidence and they're giving you that point for complexity, then you wouldn't then earn it for outside evidence as well. So there's no double dipping. If anybody wants your essays looked at, head over to our Discord channel. If one of the interns that's in here could just post a link, that would be helpful. You can post your questions over in the Discord channel, post your essays that you want to write, and someone will take a look at it. How long should contextualization be? It's, yeah, like three to 5 sentences maybe, I think is plenty. Maybe like 4 is sort of a sweet spot. You don't need to write an entire paragraph. It's your background information, right? So the thing about the AP World or any of these AP essays, like, unfortunately, we're not teaching you how to be a good writer here. We're teaching you how to get the points on this rubric, which is something that I think a lot of us would agree that is kind of crazy, right? That we can teach you good writing for all of your education, and then we get to this point where, like, forget what you learned, just do X, Y, and Z. But that's kind of where we're at. And so I want to help you play the game. And so, you know, your background information, like when you're writing this essay, forget the hook. You don't need a hook at all. It's just fluff. Forget it. It's a waste of time. But then your background information is like 4 sentences-ish. That's just bring up the context that you want to bring up and relate it to the prompt, and then hit your thesis, and that's it. The questions around, like, how long does my essay have to be? Doesn't matter, right? There's no official length for anything. So hopefully that answers it. All right, I'll answer a few more questions. Definitely went a lot longer than I thought, but you guys are sticking around, so I'm here for you. In your thesis, how is it made clear which side you're arguing for? Because when you evaluate to the extent, isn't one side supposed to be stronger than the other? Yeah, so I would start it. It's the way you phrase it, right? So if you say, although X, this really affected, you know, this topic because of Y and Z. You know, what you'll know is because of your qualifier, right? You'll have a word in there that's like, this was more than this, something like that, right? And so that's how they'll know what you're arguing, is you'll have some kind of word that's like railroad supported. So you're clearly saying it is more this side, but I'm going to also show you the other side too. Yes, so I'll make a key. Let's see. Okay. Do we only use one part of HIPP in each body paragraph's evidence, or do you use all of HIPP? Additionally, I thought we analyzed the doc. Let's say you include 1 to 3 parts of HIPP in a doc. Okay, so for HIPP, you do not need to do all of it for every document. You just need one. HIPP is just like it's literally just a menu. Think of it as like a drop down, right? And you're just going to select one. All right, so for this document, which will be the easiest to analyze, that's it. So you don't need to do them all. And then in terms of like how you structure this, some of you guys just brought up ACE, which you use for short answer questions. It's kind of similar with, you know, the way you structure these body paragraphs, because you're just answering the question in your topic sentence, and then you're citing an example, right, from the documents, and then you're explaining it. And part of that explanation is proving where this document is coming from. And so that's where you use HIPP. So you don't need to do more than you got to do. All right, we talked about most of these. All right, lots and lots of questions here. What do you guys think? What do you guys think the DBQ will be on this year? 2019 DBQ predictions. I have no idea. Nobody actually knows. So if you hear anyone on the internet saying that they know, they're lying. You know, none of us knows. I would guess, this is just my prediction. Okay, so this is not any sort of actual answer, but I would guess that it will be on content since period 4. My guess for that is because they're cutting the exam. And so having a document having a DBQ, like I know it says that the DBQ is on 3 to 6, but I don't think that they would do a DBQ right now on period 3. Who knows? And then with that said, last year was on period 5. Year before that, I think, was on wealth accumulation in period 4. I would say it's tough. I think a DBQ about something I think a DBQ about like independence movements, decolonization. That's my guess. Decolonization. Gunpowder empires would be crazy. I honestly wouldn't be surprised if it's gunpowder empires. So that's my guess. My guess is that it's not going to be an early one. It's going to be a later one. And then College Board's going to use that as their like, see, they did better on the later, on the later, information. That's my guess. But who knows? I can't wait to find out. It's so exciting. So exciting for me, because then like you guys are taking the test and we're just like, oh my God, what is it? What is it? What is it? And then obviously everyone will post memes after. And so then we'll have to, that's how we'll find out what it'll be on, because I'll look at that. And then they release the essays after that. And so what I'll probably do is like a reaction video, so it's like, here, I won't look at them, but like, here we go. Here's the video. Cool. So an hour and 42 minutes on DBQs on a Saturday night, snowing, almost May. Sounds like we did it. All right, so head to the poll and just edit. How do you feel now on the DBQ? Edit the poll. Great, okay, terrible. Or give me something in the chat. On a scale of 0 to 7, on a DBQ scale, how do you feel about it? 7 would be like, I got this. I'm going to get all these points for show. Oh, awesome. 5s and 6. 1. Okay, so if you're feeling less than a 3 right now, then definitely do some practice essays. All right. So I want you going into exam day feeling above a 5. 5, 6, 7, feeling like I got this. I feel good about this. But if you can get a 4 or 5 on the DBQ, you're not going to get a 1 on the exam. You're at least going to get a 2, because chances are you probably got some other points too. So we're going to be okay. All right. So we've got a lot more streams for you guys. Let me just pull up the calendar. We are live from, we're going to put some links in the chat too. We are live tonight. Some of the stuff is for Euro, but it's similar. So we're live right now with AP Euro. It's all about the 18th, 19th century. Tomorrow we're going to do 2 things on period 3. We have CCOT for Indian Ocean and a review of Unit 3 using SPICE. So for those of you guys that were like, what the heck is Unit 3? Come back tomorrow. We're going to go through Unit 3 in 2 different ways. One through SPICE, so like social, political, interaction, and cover it all. And then on Monday night, we're going to do, we might just focus on the, tomorrow night, we may just focus on, or Monday night, we may just focus on period 4. Yeah, so we have new teachers coming in to do streams. And so really trying to support like West Coast a bit more. So tomorrow night is review of Unit 3 using SPICE is at 8 p.m. Pacific. So if you can't come and watch the streams, it's time to join Fiveable Plus if you've been waiting on that. There is a code here. Actually, here's what I'm gonna do. You guys stuck around for so long, so I'm gonna give you guys a. Some of you guys are forever members. Some of you guys have joined earlier. So I'm gonna throw in a code that we have right now on a YouTube video that's about to go up. I'm gonna give it to you now if you want it. So if you're not yet a member, if you use the code YouTube50, you can get 50% off because you stuck around this whole time. So that means you'll be in Fiveable and getting all the things you need for whatever 35 divided by 50 is. I mean, now's the time, y'all. Go talk to your parents, see if you can do it. 35 divided by 2, $17.50, and we're gonna help you save thousands of dollars. I mean, talk about a steal. So YouTube 50. Here's the link. The membership is for this school year, but we're definitely gonna give everyone that becomes a member this year, we're gonna give out a like discount for next year too, because you're already a member. http://app.fiveable.me. Yeah, if you're a forever member, you're legit forever. Forever. You came in early. You were part of the OG members. So as long as you supported me then I can support you forever. This stream will be archived and only available for Fiveable Plus members. Our streams during exam week are only for Fiveable Plus members. So if this was useful for you and you want to think about your future self and make sure that you're ready to go, definitely make sure you save your spot. So again, it's 50% off right now. So if you use the code YouTube50, get in there. We're giving that out to like the first 100 people, and it's about to go live on YouTube soon. So it's going to get used. So if you're going to use it tonight. All right, y'all, I'm out. I got to peace out, eat some dinner. Still stay away from the snow. We'll see you guys tomorrow for our streams and Monday. So much. Big week. I'm ready. If you're trying to memorize the Chinese dynasties, memorize the song. The Chinese dynasty song. Maybe we'll just perform it live. Maybe Claire will perform it live.
Yeah.